Hey, Jeff, thank you for taking a minute out today to talk about Tupac and your life as a writer and all of this, just all this activity that's going on around you. I appreciate it,
And
man.
dog owner.
Yeah,
And dog
dog.
owner.
Yes, absolutely. That's number one on the list.
Yeah.
Before we get into this, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was raging and just taking its toll on all of us, changing the world. How did you get through the pandemic, and how has it influenced the way that you approach writing and projects now?
I think like everyone, I was very miserable and I hated it. And I probably handled it as poorly or as well as anyone else. My kids were home. I'm actually in my son's room. My son's in college now.
Okay.
And my son and he's a college sophomore now, but we probably played 100 games of pickup basketball in front of the house. I mean, just nonstop basketball. And that was actually great. Like that was a real bond for us,
Yeah.
But I didn't handle it well at all. And I don't know if it's impacted my career. I had a book come out during the period, a book about the Shaq Kobe Lakers, and there was nowhere to go to promote it, which was very weird.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it impacted my writing, but I think it made me certainly, like everyone, appreciate human contact and being able to I love reporting, and part of what I love about reporting is going places and meeting people and
Yep.
traveling to wherever and sitting down with someone. And during COVID, I definitely missed sort of being able to do that. There's a lot of phone interviews. I will say this, the one thing about reporting a book during COVID is everyone was home and they were happy to talk.
That's it. I
That's
remember that. And that's why I'm asking, because writing is a solitary activity, but you interview so much. You're in front of people. You're a
Mhm.
social creature. So I'd imagine that would have to take a toll. And especially being up in the New York area, it was different than the way it played out in Kansas City or Florida or in other places. It was like I interviewed a lot of jazz musicians during that time period,
Mhm.
and I increasingly heard the desperation in the voices of the musicians, where neighbors got tired of hearing the horn playing all the time, or it was like they couldn't play a gig. They couldn't do what they got weaned on doing their whole lives.
Yeah. I actually live in California, even though I'm from New York, but it's basically the same situation.
Okay, yeah,
Um, um, yeah, it sucked. I mean, it just sucked. And it's actually, this whole profession is a weird job for me anyway, because I actually am very social and writing is very isolating. So, I am not really a natural fit to write books in a lot of ways because I
yeah.
like interaction. I like engaging with people, and you get to do it when you report the book. But when you sit down and write the thing, it's like being in a cave for 6 or 7 months. So it's a weird job for me, actually.
Yeah. Well, take me back to your beginnings. Where were you born or raised, and was writing always something that was drawn in the stars for you?
I was born in a little town called Mahopac, New York, which is about an hour north of New York City. And I'm mainly a sports writer. Like Tupac is a departure for me. And growing up, I had no one in my family who cared about sports at all. Literally nobody. And I used to go, I don't know what got me into it. I remember being a kid and loving the Rams were playing the Steelers in the Super Bowl in 1980. And I remember loving like the Rams helmets and Vince Ferragamo, their quarterback, and thinking that was all really cool. And I started going to the local library, the Mahopac Public Library, and just reading the old Sports Illustrated and then reading the old, like all the sports books and just getting mesmerized by them. And then writing for my high school newspaper and writing for the local newspaper and just really liking that you have a voice. Like
Yeah.
I was a kid who wasn't that popular and I was a runner and a kind of a nerdy kid. And when you wrote, people actually paid attention to you and you had your name and you had that kind of stuff. So that was a draw for me.
So I did notice that you were a cross country runner. Why, of all being a sports fan, what impelled you to be a cross country runner?
I was good at it. I used to, when I was a kid, I grew up in the era, the golden age of the 10K, of the local 6 mile race and the local 5 mile race. And where I grew up, there were just every weekend there was a race to run. So my parents would drive me to all these different towns, starting when I was probably 7. And I was always like the youngest kid running the 10K for a long time. And I just loved it. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved running around a lake. I loved running in the sticks. I loved passing older people. Um, Everything about it. I was winning trophies and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I was never a superstar. I was a very good runner. And I went to Delaware and I ran a year of track and cross country and got my ass absolutely kicked. And that was it for me as a runner. I mean, I still ran marathons, but never as a competitive runner. I was done.
I look back on my life and I was a cross country runner in high school, but I was 4'11". There was no other choice for me. I was
Yeah.
just tiny. But I love that endorphin rush. There was something where I think about how many miles. It was like, my God, I ran all the time, but I loved it. It was like
Mhm.
I looked forward to it. My body just craved it. It was a weird psychology.
It's interesting because as a sports writer, you'll hear people justify football by saying, well, the camaraderie and blah, blah. There's nothing like the camaraderie. I thought the camaraderie among runners was really special.
Yeah.
And just the bus rides to events and like complaining about the struggle. And you're done after running a really muddy course and your legs are covered in mud and your muscles are heaving. And like, I mean, I love everything. I love runners. I love the community of runners. It's very rare you meet an asshole runner. It's one
Yeah.
of those sports you just don't meet many assholes in running.
You're right, dude.
Yeah.
You're right. So when did you start this sports writing journey? What was your first gig, and then when did you know it was your destiny?
Well, I mean, I started as the sports editor of my high school newspaper, the Mailpack High School Chieftain. And I really love like this thing that you could just stand on a sideline and watch the games. That was cool to me. And it was Mailpack versus Carmel, and you'd be walking the sidelines covering games. And during the summers when I was a kid, I started interning for free for the local newspaper, the Putnam Trader. And the sports editor would just let me write profiles of different people. And I really thought it was cool, like that you got to talk to people and get to know them and ask any questions you wanted. And my first job out of college was actually at the Nashville Tennessean, but I was hired as a food and fashion writer because it was the only job they had open. They didn't have any sports jobs open. So I was a food and fashion writer briefly. And eventually I got moved to high school wrestling. So I was the high school wrestling beat writer for the Nashville Tennessean. And even though nobody gives a crap about high school wrestling, I did. Like I don't care about wrestling, but I cared about covering wrestling. And I got really into it and really into the wrestlers and thinking about it in different ways. And then from there I went to Sports Illustrated. So it was like I'm the guy who went from Class D. I went from covering high school wrestling to Sports Illustrated. It was a
My
big jump.
God,
It
that's
was a
the
big
upper
jump.
echelons. But
Yeah.
did you always have a dream of hitting the high rise of getting into sports writing, or were you just happy doing what you were doing?
No, I when I was a kid, I told my mom, maybe I was a junior in high school, and I guaranteed her I was going to be a writer for Sports Illustrated. And I'm from a, Jewish family in New York, and the idea is like be a lawyer, be a doctor, especially back then. And my mom, I remember I've reminded her of this, and she acknowledges it. She was like, "You have to be realistic." I was like, "No, I'm telling you, I'm going to be writing for Sports Illustrated." And it was just a real dream of mine, and I just pursued it with everything I had. Like everything I had, everything when I was writing along the way in college, at the Tennessean, freelance. I was always like thinking, what kind of style will work for Sports Illustrated? How can I become that level of a writer? And when I got hired there in '96, it was one of the greatest joys of my life.
Wow. I mean, so to be around all those cats that you read all those years, that had to be mind-blowing.
Oh yeah, they're used to I started SI as a reporter, which is kind of low level, and you work your way up. And ultimately, I covered Major League Baseball. And they used to have back in the golden age of magazine, every holiday season they would fly in all the writers from around the country, and they would have the State of Sports Illustrated meeting. And I remember sitting in the room like the first time, and there's Rick Riley, and there's Steve Rushin, and there's Bill Knack, and Lee Montville, and Phil Taylor, and all these studs. And I always say I was like Leitner on the dream team. Like I was like the guy who didn't really belong, but was blown away. I mean, yeah, I these are my heroes. Like more than the athletes, these guys are my heroes. So to be, I feel like I feel like I still suffer from a little bit of impersonator syndrome, where like I still think all those guys are much better than I am, and I don't really belong there. And somehow I got lucky and whatever. But it was a dream come true.
So when you break down your philosophy, your thrill of being a writer, was it about the interview or was it about the event you were covering?
Mm. I would say more than anything, it was about you have this either a real badge or an invisible badge, but something that allows you to ask a grieving mother, what's it like to lose your son? Or ask someone who's suffering from cancer, what is it like to sit in chemo? You can go up to Bernie Williams and say, I'm never going to play center field for the Yankees. So can you explain to me what it feels like to be out there on opening day, standing in the middle of the field, 45,000 people cheering for you? Like I love that you can ask any question you want. My dad used to joke, I was always a guy as a kid and still am, who's like, I don't know, you ask the nurse when you go to a doctor, what's the grossest thing you've ever seen? You ask the waiter, do you guys ever pick food off the floor? Like, I like asking stuff. Like, I really get a kick out of that. So that was it.
So what was the first big interview that you scored that you were like, just, you almost had to pinch yourself? It was that moment where you got in front of the athlete and you were covering the story. What was that athlete for you?
This is going to sound weird, but I was in college And Dorothy Hamill came to the University of Delaware, the figure skater.
Yeah.
And I got to interview Dorothy Hamill in person. And for some weird reason, I'm sure I was terribly nervous, like to Dorothy Hamill, I was just some loser at the University of Delaware. I had to ask her a few questions. But for me, it was like, holy crap, I get to sit with Dorothy Hamill, Olympian Dorothy Hamill. So that was a huge deal for me, like getting interviewed Dorothy Hamill. And then also when I was at Delaware, I attended a press conference where Jimmy Carter was there. And I got to ask Jimmy Carter a question. So asking a president a question for me as a young writer was just really cool.
So when you get on the circuit, you get to run into all kinds of people, whether it's an executive or an athlete or somebody in that world. Who did you love running into? Who was a good interview? Who was a cool cat? Who was someone that you were like, man, I hope they're here. I just want to run into them.
Oh man, there've been a lot over the years. I mean, there was a baseball player, he has since passed, and he was actually Derek Jeter's closest friend with the Yankees, and his name was Gerald Williams, and he was an outfielder.
Yeah.
This is going to sound dumb, and it doesn't even mean that much, but every time I saw most athletes, when you're covering baseball, don't really remember you. Like you're just a guy, you're another writer. Every single time I saw Gerald Williams, he would go, Mr. Pearlman. And I'd go, Mr. Williams. And I love that. I love Ken Griffey Jr. Ken Griffey Jr. would be like, I used to wear a backwards beret when I covered sports. So people would remember me because I was like wandering from team to team. And Junior would be like, yo, where's your hat? And I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a little thing. Sean Casey, the former Reds first baseman, his nickname was the Mayor because he was just incredibly kind and likable. And he's the only athlete I've ever seen who invited the beat writers to his wedding. So, like, those are some of the guys when I was a baseball writer.
So in that journey, I know the world of sports writing can get contentious. Athletes get tired,
Mhm.
lots of the same questions. What was the first time you had an athlete that confronted you and it really made you grow?
Oh, I mean, I wrote a story about a racist baseball player named John Rocker that came out, and that was my story at the end of the 1990 season, where I basically spent X number of hours with him, and he's a racist, vile, homophobic piece of shit. And he wasn't aware, I don't think, of how offensive his comments were. But when I wrote the story and it came out, and he just got brutalized, like brutalized. For people who are too young, just Google John Rocker and you'll
Yeah.
see. Well, when I saw him the next time, he was not happy to see me and definitely wanted to kill me and didn't kill me because I'm here, but like definitely wanted to kill me. And that was a very awkward experience. But I will say, like, you learn in this business, like, you just learn to walk through your fears and like confrontation is part of it. And one thing that's very important in journalism that I think is lacking a little bit nowadays is accountability. And if you write something about someone, you're supposed to show your face. Now, we all fall short sometimes, but you're supposed to at least be like, look, here I am. If you have something to say to me, here I am.
I think Pat Mahomes Sr. ran into him in New Orleans last year.
Correct.
Right.
They were going to box. They were
That's
going to do a
right.
celebrity boxing match. I'm very glad they did not.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would not
That
have
would have
been
been
good.
stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how much of a departure of doing this Tupac endeavor, which you had hundreds of interviews, sounded like you poured your heart and soul and hours into this. What
Mhm.
made you get away from the sports world and enter this world, which Tupac is not only a cultural icon, there's all these conspiracies, there's so much that goes into his lore. What made you do it?
I mean, I've written 10 books and they're all sports. And, about 15 years ago, Garth Brooks did a rock album and he
I
went by
remember.
Chris Gaines.
Yep.
It was actually a good album. And like, but everyone was like, what the hell is Garth Brooks doing? But I really always admired Garth Brooks for giving the rock album a try. I just thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Garth Brooks is trying a rap album. And I want to try something different. I'm a huge hip hop fan. I'm a huge Tupac fan. I love his music. I felt like there wasn't really a great definitive Tupac biography out there. There were a lot of books about him. I didn't think like the one where you really like the stuff I learned at Sports Illustrated, interview everyone, then interview other people, then interview other people. I didn't feel like that book was there. So I just thought, I want to do something different than sports. I love hip hop. I love Tupac. I think he's a fascinating life. I think his legacy is really intriguing. And I just said, I'm going to do it. And when I pitched it, when I told my agent at first, he's like, you're a white Jewish sports writer. Nobody wants you to do a Tupac book. And I'm like, but I want to do a Tupac book. And I got a deal and I did it. It was hell, but fun. Hell.
I can only imagine. So, but what, in that journey of writing this book, you have to learn things about yourself, maybe discoveries that you didn't realize at your core. What did you
Mhm.
learn about yourself over this process of collecting and writing this book?
I mean, I don't know if I learned anything new, but what I can say is I just think like there's something to be said for being really curious. Like every now and then you meet writers and all they do is talk. They talk and talk and talk. And I never understand it. Like we're listeners. Like at our core, we're listeners. Obviously, you're interviewing me, so I answer your question, but like we're listeners. And what I really thought was cool about this experience and what that was new for me is like multiple times, and I never did this as a sports writer because I had a sports background. Like Tupac lived in Marin City, California for a while. And there was this guy there, a very well-known drug dealer named Brian Tynes. He doesn't deal anymore, but he was a drug dealer back in the day. And I was sitting with him in his car. And Brian is now in his 60s and he wound up being a school bus driver, his whole thing, but he used to be a drug dealer. And I was with him and I said, I was like, listen, man, I was like, my life is a 180 from yours. Like, I'm white. I grew up in upstate New York. I had two parents who were home. My mom was a probation officer. My dad was an accountant. I knew I was going to college. I knew everything would be okay. I knew I wouldn't be shot in the neighborhood I lived, all this stuff, right? I was like, you will never find anyone who's more fascinated in your life than me. I was like, you will never find anyone more fascinated. And I said that repeatedly to people, and it was never a lie. Like, I just thought, like, I'm so fascinated, and it's such a gift to be able to go into public housing in Marin City and sit with a guy who used to deal drugs and hear his story.
Hmm.
It was like, it was beautiful to me. So I don't know what I learned new, but I was reminded that I really enjoy hearing people's stories that are not similar to mine.
What did you learn about Tupac? I mean, I don't think people understand how talented he was. There were so many layers and depth of who he was. Did you realize that going in, or did that unfold? What unfolded about him?
I think what I learned most, honestly, and I think the number one thing people miss, people who know him pretty well and people who don't know him at all, is the trauma this guy went through. Like his life was one long traumatic narrative. He grew up in incredible poverty. He was homeless for a while. Him, his mom, his sister, set homeless for a while. His mom was a crack addict. Twice, at least twice, she kicked him out of the house. Um, it was one horrible thing after another. And also like how alone he was. Like his life was a lonely life. His sister Seth said to me, you think he died happy? He didn't die happy. He died alone. And like the number of people, I know we hear it in sports, like users come along, but the number of people who just saw him as a paycheck, just saw him as a house or an apartment or a nice meal. It was just, it was dizzying. And honest to God, like a really good friend of mine who writes about hip hop read the book and he called me and he's like, this is the most depressing thing I've read. And I'm like, I know, like his life is sad. It's not joyful. It's sad. And like when you hear songs like I Get Around or you hear songs like I don't even hit him up, there's a peppiness to a lot of his music, but it belies what he was actually going through. And that to me was the biggest eye opener. I did not realize the depths of the trauma that Tupac Shakur had lived through.
So, the one thing I wrote sports for a long time and was in that world, and
Mm.
now I cover jazz, a lot of jazz. It was so refreshing to walk into a different world of musicians.
Mhm.
So my question to you is this: as fascinated as you said you were with interviewing all these subjects, how much different was the world of getting into that music entertainment from sports? And did you love the departure?
It was crazy. It was funny. I was warned early on that a lot of people ask me for money to be interviewed, and that is a fact. And I never got that in sports, but you get a lot of that because in hip hop right now, I don't know how it goes for jazz, but in hip hop, there are these different YouTube channels that pay people.
Yeah.
So they become the expectation exists that they're going to get paid. And I said repeatedly, look, I can't pay you. Like journalistically, I can't pay you. But no one will be more interested to hear what you have to say than me. Um, I think I mean, the thing about, all right, the hardest thing about this book, like for me, from a logistics standpoint, is like my last book was about Bo Jackson, right? You're in Kansas City, so Bo Jackson.
Oh yeah.
I knew everywhere Bo Jackson was for 80% of the year looking back because sports are so scheduled. So I can go back and I could see the Kansas City Royals play the Yankees these 3 days. They played this 3 days. So I had this schedule. You don't have that with hip hop. Yeah, he was on tour for a certain amount of times, but
True.
it's ambiguous. It's not documented nearly as well as sports are. And that was really, really hard for me. And the other thing is, I think a lot of people exaggerated their stories. And I think part of that is from being paid. So if some YouTube channel comes along and says, we'll pay you $1,000. Well, you better have good stories.
Yeah.
And like, I think a lot of people exaggerated the level of closeness. Not they didn't lie, but I think there were a lot of exaggerations about how close they were to Tupac. I'm sorry, that's my dog,
No,
Poppy.
you're good. No, it's all good. It's
And if you look at it, I think most people like Tupac kind of, I don't think he was as known as people think. I don't think maybe there are a lot of people who thought he was my buddy, but I don't think people realize he was very guarded and very distant in a lot of ways.
You know, the one thing that blows me away, I'm 53. I just took a ticket stub to my best friend in high school from 1989. And we used to sign our ticket stubs. So it's this old Royal stub. I gave it to him for nostalgia and he looked it up. Bo Jackson hit a home run, had a double that game. And I
Yeah.
sit back as this guy that lived in Kansas City. I'm like, my God, I got to watch this guy all the time. It was
Yeah.
just a part of our fabric, but we watched Bo. We would see him come by and we were like, look at that dude. So
Yeah.
and he just seems like there's a level of enigmaticness that
Yes.
he's like plainly right there. He's a Mississippi, right near like southern. I'm gonna.
Alabama. Alabama.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, but he's from the South. There's that way that he comes across. How fun was that to write that book?
It was hard because he didn't help me. So he's a very enigmatic guy. I mean, I'll tell you, I wrote the book. I spoke with him one time on the phone. He was actually nice about it, but he said he wouldn't help me, but he wasn't a jerk or anything. Book comes out. He's clearly not happy when the book comes out. I had 4 speaking engagements in Alabama at bookstores, small independent bookstores. Bo Jackson called every one of those bookstores on his own to tell them not to let me speak.
Oh
I've
no.
never had that happen with a subject in my life. So that was a little weird. He's a quirky guy. He's very guarded. He's shy but kind of off-putting, but also legendary. I never blame guys for not talking to me. But I think it's a little weird to call bookstores and say, "Don't let this guy speak."
Yeah, that is strange. So 1986 Mets. Were you a fan? Were like I mean, I want to split you being a journalist and being a fan. You wrote about that team. Were you a fan of that team when it was happening?
Oh, definitely. I grew up on a street in Emerald Lane, and I was in 8 Emerald Lane, and 2 houses up was one of my good friends, Dennis Gargano. And Dennis's dad, Vinny, was a diehard Mets fan. And I would go over to hang out with Dennis, but I'd wind up sitting on the couch drinking a Coke with Mr. Gargano. And Mr. Gargano would explain to me the intricacies of baseball because my family didn't care. So he'd be like, watch how Gooden throws his pitch, and Ray Knight is doing this, and blah, blah, blah. And that made me really appreciate that team and that era. So I was 13 going on 14 that season. So for me, the 86 Mets were just enormous, like just enormous. So that writing it was like diving back into my childhood, which was really cool, actually.
But did you feel like I now that I look back on it, my wife watched 30 for 30 that special on it.
Mhm.
And she was just like, "My God, how did they do it?" Sometimes I think after all these years, how the hell did they pull it off? Because it was miraculous. All these things they did when they were in Houston, they came back. There was just game after game, inning after inning, hit after hit, and they just did it. I mean, do you look back on that and from looking down on Earth from outer space and think, how the hell did that happen?
I think it's the power of cocaine and drinking a lot. I think that really powered them to great triumphs. I mean, I don't even know. Like sometimes a bit weird stuff happens in baseball, Like that's just kind of how it is. Like they were, I mean, it's so cliche. Like they were super gritty, they were super talented. They just kept fighting and fighting and fighting, like they were that kind of team. So, but like I don't believe like team of destiny stuff. I did when I was a kid, but I don't really. I just think like also you get lucky sometimes. And like the other team sometimes throws a bad pitch or doesn't handle a ball and blah blah blah. And they really got lucky a lot. It was a very rare team. They also were just wildly talented, wildly talented.
Yeah.
So that always helps.
I didn't realize till years later that Billy Buckner didn't play in the late innings, and they only put him in on that game because they wanted him on the field to celebrate because there was one out left.
That is correct. That was a
So,
huge mistake. John McNamara was the manager, and
yeah.
he probably deserves more blame than Bill Buckner because Buckner, they replaced him with Dave Stapleton usually. He was a
Uh-huh.
better defensive first baseman. Buckner had no ankles left. His knees
Yeah.
were crap. He was an older player, and they left him in. And that, Buckner had to endure. He has since passed, but he had to endure years of that sort of trauma. I'm like, it wasn't really, he shouldn't have been in the game. He
Right.
shouldn't have been in the game. I mean, we all make mistakes. I don't think John
Yeah.
McNamara should endure years either. It's sports, but
Yeah,
you know, yeah.
for sure. So, what book did you go into and learn the most about the subject that you were going in? Like, it was revelatory. You had no idea that you were walking into something that was going to be that big.
Oh, I'm not just saying it, but this one by far. Um, Number one, because again, I'm a sports writer. So like my knowledge of the 86 Mets, even Bo Jackson, was very high.
Yeah.
Tupac, my knowledge of his music was high, but my knowledge of his his life and his travels and his journeys was not high at all. So it was incredibly, incredibly educational for me, which is cool. Um, I have a friend named John Ike who wrote a great biography of Martin Luther King, and it's called King of Life. It's such a good book. And we were eating one time out here in California, and I was complaining about the Tupac process. I'm like, the shit just kills me. Oh, it's so hard. And he's basically said to me, he's like, you're getting paid to get a PhD in Tupac Shakur. He goes, why are you complaining? People would do that for free. And I was like, that's a really good reminder. And that is how I feel. I feel like I got a PhD in Tupac.
The one thing too that I respect and admire about what you're doing is from a journalistic standpoint is from an investigative standpoint, all the exhaustive research you put into it and putting out quality that people are grabbing onto is such a huge thing right now. Do you feel like journalism has been slipping because of all of the things with social media and AI and all of that? I mean, how vital is it that what you're doing continues to happen?
I mean, I don't want to exaggerate my own importance because I'm not saying I'm very important, but I do feel like certainly journalism has taken a huge hit. And even just not that long ago, there were tons of long form sports writers all over the place who would give you 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 word pieces, deep dives, digs. And it's funny because maybe 6 years ago, I was writing those pieces for Bleacher Report. Bleacher Report went through this phase where they had a thing called BR Mag, and it was long form pieces. And I wrote a 10,000 word piece on a University of Miami football player. Um, and somewhere along the line, Bleacher Report realized it is cheaper for us to do videos and we'll get more hits that way. And that was it for BR Mag as a thing. And I just think no one is getting great information anymore. And everyone is depending on 20-second TikTok hits and little clips and little snippets. And when you go and you do something in depth, I think if you do it well, it kind of stands out.
Yeah,
But fewer and fewer people are doing it. So
yeah,
it's tough. I mean, I don't know how this book is going to sell. Like 20 years ago, I think it would have sold amazingly.
yeah.
But it's a different age for books even. So I don't know. I don't know.
What do you do on the day the book is released? Do you have like a ritual? What do you do when it's actually happening and it's released that day?
So that for me, the big day is this happened 2 days ago. I came home, there's a big box there,
Yeah,
and here's the book. And this is the first time I held the book.
yeah,
For me, seeing the book for the first time is enormous.
yeah.
It's my favorite moment is seeing the book. And like over the past few days, I just walk around with the book and I'll look at the book and I'll feel the book. And I love the cover and the whole and the day the book comes out, you're usually promoting. So I think I have a book signing that day. It's on the 21st of October. You do radio hits, stuff like that. But nowadays, just since because you can order books ahead of time, it doesn't have quite the same clout as
Yeah.
it did 20 years ago.
But the real work begins when the book comes out, right? I mean, all of this that you're going to do to publicize and interviews and all of that, this is kind of the earnest after the fact.
Well, it's so funny. I just said something about this. To someone, you cannot just expect you write a book and you're done, and whoever the publicist is at the publishing company will handle it. You can't. You have to call in every favor. You have to think outside the box. How can I promote this? What are the ways I can get this out there? Who will listen? I do a thing. I literally paid for it. I print up bookmarks. I print up stickers. I'm doing it literally today while we sing here. Book plates where I sign and I say, if you pre-order the book, email me a screenshot of the pre-order. I'll send you a bunch of stuff. Like it's just a grind, but I don't know any other way to do it.
So, is the moment that your wife gave a kidney, is that still one of the greatest moments of your life?
I mean, it was a scary moment, but it was
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, she gave it to a stranger
Yeah,
on a
right.
flyer that she found in a Starbucks.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a superstar. My wife is an absolute superstar.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, it was, and the interesting thing is we didn't know the family at all. Like they were strangers. We didn't know them. Met them for the first time at the hospital. And here we are 6 years later, and we always go to their house for Christmas, and
That's
they come
great.
over for the Jewish holidays, and they become maybe our closest friends in California. And we didn't know them at all when my wife donated the kidney.
Man, life's so cool. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, everybody that you work with, fans, everybody that gets your book, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I mean, some, I mean, I don't think I'm not just saying this. when I was younger, I used to think like I'm going to be a star writer and I'm going to be blah blah blah. And I think as you get older, you realize like who gives a shit? Like what does it really matter? Like I'm going to die and people stop reading my books and it just happens and people forget me. I think it's such a cliche, so I apologize, but like I've tried to be a really good dad.
Yep.
Like I've really tried to be a good dad. I try to be involved in my kids' lives as much as I possibly can. And the best thing about being a writer for me by far, which I did not realize when I started Sports Illustrated, was that I got to be around for everything.
Hmm.
So I was the class mom when they called it literally the class mom.
Yep.
I never missed games. I never missed plays. I never missed dances. I all of it. And that to me is the best part of this job by far for me, for my life.
Yeah, no, there's nothing cliche about that. What's the greatest game from an energy level that you ever witnessed? The greatest sporting event you ever like the energy, the feeling. What was that?
Hmm. It would be it was the first game in New York after 9/11. It
Oh
was the
wow.
Mets and the Braves. Mike Piazza hit home run the dead
Uh-huh.
center. Place went crazy. But what I remember about that game, it's interesting because you're a jazz writer. Liza Minnelli came on the field and sang New York during the seventh inning stretch, and she did a kick line with the cops on the field.
Huh?
It was, I mean, it's an indescribably awesome moment that I was there to see. And then later, it's funny. I mean, if you follow me on social media, I'm very, very liberal. But George Bush threw out the first pitch at the World Series in New York, and he stepped on the mound. Awesome, like awesome, awesome moments from my time covering sports. So those two moments were just, you know, hair standing up on your arms.
100%. Let's get fantastical. Time machine pulls up when we get off the phone. You can go see one game in the history of sports. Where are you going?
I'd probably go see Jackie Robinson's first game with the Dodgers. Be really fascinated by that. So
Yeah,
my standard answer. I'll stick by it.
what a great answer. So the book comes out October 17th?
October 21st.
21st, sorry. 21st. If they want to pre-order, go to your website. What's the best way to
Or
do that?
Amazon or whatever. But if you email me at tupacbook and the number one at Gmail and show me a screenshot, I will send you stuff.
I love it. Absolutely. Jeff, what a joy, man. Thank you, sir. Best of luck on the release. This has been an absolute honor. Thank you for taking a minute out.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate
You
it.
bet. Thank you.